I asked why I wasn't invited to my son and Dill's anniversary. She said, "You're just an ATM." I was folding towels in the laundry room when my phone buzzed. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special about that Tuesday, except the way the morning light came through the window, hit the dust motes floating in the air, and I remember thinking I should clean the blinds. That was the last time I had a thought like that. A normal thought. A boring thought. A thought that didn't feel like someone was standing on my chest. The towels were still warm from the dryer. I used to love that feeling, the heat soaking into my hands, the softness of the fabric. I folded them the way my mother taught me, in birds, then in half, then stacked by color, white on top, blue underneath. The guest bathroom towels went in a separate pile because they were the nice ones nobody ever used, except for Christmas and Easter. I was 68 years old, and I had been folding towels the same way for 46 years. My phone buzzed again, then again. 3 quick buzzes in a row, which usually meant a text chain. My daughter-in-law Kelly has a group chat with my daughter Sarah and my granddaughter Maddie. I am in that chat, but I never really feel like I belong there. They send memes I don't understand, and plan lunches I am never invited to, and share photos of each other's children, while my grandchildren barely look at the camera when I try to take a picture. But I still check the chat every morning, because I am a mother, and that is what mothers do. We wait by the phone, we check the messages, we hope someone remembers we exist. The first message was from Kelly. It said only 3 more days. The second message was from Sarah. It said, "I cannot wait." The third message was from Natty. It was just a gif of champagne glasses clinking. I stared at the screen for a long time. 3 more days until what? I scrolled up through the chat history, looking for context. There was nothing, just those 3 messages sitting there like a secret I was supposed to ignore. So I typed, 3 more days until what? I watched the screen. The little dots appeared. Kelly was typing. Then the dots disappeared. Then they appeared again. Then Sarah sent a laughing emoji. Then Kelly sent a heart emoji. Then nothing. No answer. Just emojis. Just the digital equivalent of a pat on the head. I put the phone down and finished the towels. I folded the last blue towel and placed it on top of the stack, and I told myself I was being paranoid. That is what happens when you get old. You start imagining things. You start feeling left out of things that probably do not even matter. You become sensitive and needy, and you drive everyone away with your insecurities. That is what my daughter Sarah told me last Thanksgiving. She said, "Mom, you are too sensitive." She said it in front of everyone, in front of my son Michael, in front of Kelly. In front of my husband Robert, who was already starting to forget things, but still had enough sense to look uncomfortable. Sarah said, "Mom, not everything is about you. Maybe they just forgot to mention something small. Maybe it is nothing." She said it with that tone, that I am the adult and you are the child tone. I am her mother. I changed her diapers. I sat up with her when she had the flu. I worked double shifts at the hospital to pay for her braces and her dance classes and her first car. And now she tells me I am too sensitive? I went to the kitchen and poured a cup of coffee. The coffee was cold. I had made it 2 hours ago and forgotten to drink it. That happens more now. I pour a cup and I get distracted by something, and then I find it hours later, sitting there like a monument to my own absent mind. I poured it down the sink and made a fresh pot. While it brewed, I looked out the window at the backyard. The grass needed mowing. The bird feeder was empty. The garden I used to tend was mostly weeds now, because my knees hurt too much to kneel, and nobody else was going to do it. Michael used to mow the lawn every other weekend. He stopped coming by about a year ago. He said he was busy. He said work was crazy. He said Kelly needed him at home. But I saw the photos on Facebook. Him and Kelly and the kids at the lake. Him and Kelly and the kids at a baseball game. Him and Kelly and the kids at a barbecue at Sarah's house. The same Sarah's house, where I had not been invited in 6 months. I am not stupid. I know what is happening. I just did not want to admit it. The coffee finished brewing. I poured a fresh cup and added 1 spoon of sugar and a splash of milk, the same way I have done every morning since 1994. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I taught Michael and Sarah to do their homework, the same table where Robert told me he had been laid off from the plant, the same table where I paid bills and wrote birthday cards and clipped coupons and planned vacations we never took. That table had seen everything, and now it just sat there, holding my coffee and my phone and the weight of a life that was slowly becoming invisible. I called Michael. He did not answer. I called Sarah. She did not answer. I called Robert, who was in the living room watching the news, because he was always in the living room watching the news since he retired. He did not answer his phone either, because he had left it in the car 3 days ago and forgotten about it. I walked into the living room and stood in front of the television. Robert looked up at me with that blank look he has been wearing more and more often, the look that says, "I know you, but I am not sure why you are standing there." I said, "Robert, do you know what is happening in 3 days?" He said, "What?" I said, "I do not know. That is why I am asking you." He said, "Is it someone's birthday?" I said, "I do not think so." He said, "Is it a holiday?" I said, "It is a Tuesday." He said, "Then I do not know." He went back to watching the news. I stood there for another minute, hoping he would say something else. Something like, "Why are you worried?" Or "Let me help you figure it out." Or even just, "I love you." He did not say any of those things. He just watched the television. The newscaster was talking about a storm moving in from the west. I went back to the kitchen. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from my sister Diane. Diane lives 3 states away, and we talk once a week on Sunday nights. She is 2 years younger than me, and she has always been the one who tells me the truth, even when I do not want to hear it. The message said, "Did you get the invitation?" I stared at those 4 words for a long time. Did you get the invitation? What invitation? My fingers were shaking when I typed back, "What invitation?" Diane called me immediately. I answered, and I could hear in her voice that she already knew something was wrong. She said, "Oh, honey." I said, "Diane, what invitation?" She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Michael and Kelly are having a 10-year anniversary party on Friday night at that country club over by the highway, the one with the fountain out front. Sarah is hosting it. I got an invitation in the mail 2 weeks ago, a nice one, embossed, with an RSVP card and everything." I sat down hard on the kitchen chair. The coffee sloshed over the rim of the cup and burned my hand, but I barely felt it. I said I did not get an invitation. Diane said, "Are you sure? Maybe it got lost in the mail." I said, "I check the mail every day at 4 p.m. The only thing I got this week was a bill from the dentist and a catalog for gardening supplies and a flyer about roofing services. There was no invitation." Diane said, "Maybe they sent it to the wrong address." I said, "Michael has had my address for 40 years. He knows where I live. He sends his Christmas card here every year. He sent me a birthday card here 3 months ago. He knows the address." Diane did not say anything for a moment. Then she said the thing I already knew but could not say out loud. She said, "Maybe they did not send you one." I said, "That does not make sense. I am his mother." Diane said, "I know." I said, "I helped them buy that house. I gave them $20,000 for the down payment. I babysat those kids every weekend for 3 years. I drove 2 hours each way to pick them up from school when Kelly had that thing with her gallbladder. I cooked meals, I bought groceries, I painted the nursery when Kelly was too tired to do it herself. I did all of that, and they are having a party and they did not invite me?" Diane said, "I know, honey." I said, "I am going to call Michael." Diane said, "Maybe you should wait. Maybe you should think about how you want to handle this." I said, "I am going to call my son right now." I hung up and I called Michael. He did not answer. I called again. He did not answer. I called a 3rd time and it went straight to voicemail, which meant he had seen my calls and declined them. I have been a mother for 45 years. I know what that means. It means he did not want to talk to me. It means he knew what I was going to ask and he did not want to answer. I sat there holding the phone and staring at the kitchen wall. There is a crack in the drywall near the ceiling. It has been there for years. Robert said he would fix it, but he never did. I used to look at that crack and think I should hire someone to fix it. Now I looked at that crack and thought about how many things in my life were cracked, and nobody was coming to fix them. I decided to drive to Michael's house. The drive is 35 minutes on a good day. I took the back roads because the highway was under construction, and I did not want to sit in traffic with nothing but my own thoughts for company. The back roads take you past the old farm where we used to buy pumpkins in October, past the church where Michael made his confirmation, past the elementary school where I dropped him off every morning for 7 years. I drove slowly. The speed limit was 35, but I went 30 because I was not in any hurry to get to a place where I knew I was not wanted. I thought about Michael as a little boy. He was 3 years old and he used to climb into my bed after a nightmare and press his face into my neck and whisper, "I love you, Mommy." He was 7 years old and he made me a card at school that said, "You are the best mom in the whole world," and he drew a picture of us holding hands under a rainbow. He was 12 years old, and he cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke up with him, and he said, "Nobody will ever love me." And I said, "I will always love you." He was 17, and he got his acceptance letter to college, and he hugged me so hard he lifted me off the ground. He was 25, and he asked me to walk him down the aisle because his father was sick and could not do it. And he said, "Mom, you have always been my rock." That was the same wedding where I met Kelly. She was beautiful, long dark hair and a smile that made everyone in the room feel special. She called me Mom from the first time we met. She said, "I am so happy to be part of this family." She held my hand during the rehearsal dinner and told me she had always wanted a mother like me. Her own mother had passed away when Kelly was a teenager, and she said meeting Michael meant getting a second chance at having a mom. I cried. I hugged her. I told her she was my daughter now. I meant it. I pulled into their subdivision and drove past the rows of identical houses with their identical lawns and their identical SUVs in the driveways. Michael's house was at the end of the cul-de-sac, the one with the blue shutters and the basketball hoop in the driveway, and the tree in the front yard that Kelly had planted when they first moved in.
The tree was big now, almost as tall as the house. I parked on the street because I did not want to block the driveway. I sat in the car for a minute and looked at the house. The lights were on in the kitchen. I could see someone moving behind the curtains. Kelly, probably. Or maybe Michael. Or maybe one of the kids. I did not know anymore. I used to know everything about their lives. What time they woke up. What they ate for breakfast. What the kids were learning in school. Now I was a stranger, sitting in a car outside a house that used to feel like a second home. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. The walkway was cracked. I remembered Michael telling me he was going to replace it last summer. He never did. I rang the doorbell. It played a little tune, something classical. Beethoven, maybe? I waited. The door opened and Kelly stood there. She was wearing yoga pants and a sweatshirt, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked exactly the same as she always looked, which is to say she looked like she belonged on the cover of a catalog for healthy living. She smiled when she saw me, but the smile did not reach her eyes. She said, "Oh, hi." I said, "Hello, Kelly." She said, "We were not expecting you." I said, "I know. I am sorry to drop in unannounced. I tried calling Michael, but he did not answer." She said, "He is at work." I said, "On a Tuesday afternoon?" She said, "He had a meeting." I said, "I see. Can I come in for a minute?" She hesitated. That hesitation lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it felt like 2 years. Then she stepped aside and let me in. The house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. There was a candle burning on the entry table. I walked into the living room and looked around. The furniture was new, or at least newer than the last time I had been here. A big gray sectional, a glass coffee table, a television the size of a billboard on the wall. The family photos on the mantel had been rearranged. There used to be one of me and Michael at his college graduation. It was gone. There used to be one of me holding their oldest child the day she was born. It was gone. There was a photo of Kelly's sister and her family. There was a photo of Sarah and her husband. There was a photo of Michael and Kelly on their wedding day. I was in the background of that photo, blurry, out of focus, like I had been edited out, but not quite all the way. I sat down on the sectional. It was soft, too soft. I felt like I was sinking. Kelly stood near the fireplace with her arms crossed. She did not sit down. She did not offer me anything to drink. She just stood there looking at me like I was a salesperson who had come to the wrong door. I said, "Kelly, I am going to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." She said, "Okay." I said, "Is there a party on Friday night? An anniversary party for you and Michael?" She did not blink. She did not flinch. She just looked at me with that same flat expression and said, "Yes, there is." I said, "Why was I not invited?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she uncrossed her arms and let them hang at her sides. She looked at the floor. Then she looked at me. And then she said something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life, something that plays in my head every time I close my eyes, something that has become the before and after of my entire existence. She said, "Because you are just an ATM." I did not understand at first.
I thought I had misheard her. I said, "What?" She said, "You heard me. You are just an ATM. That is what you have always been to us. That is what you are. That is all you are." I felt the air leave my body, not like I was breathing out, like someone had reached inside my chest and pulled everything out. I tried to speak, but my mouth would not work. My hands were shaking. My eyes were burning. I said, "Kelly, I am his mother. I raised him. I loved him. I gave you everything." She said, "You gave us money. That is not the same thing as love. You think writing a check makes you a good mother. You think babysitting makes you a grandmother. You think showing up with casseroles when I was sick makes you part of this family. But you never actually saw us. You never actually listened. You just wrote checks and showed up with food and expected us to be grateful forever." I said, "That is not true. I was there for everything. Every birthday, every holiday, every school play, every soccer game. I was there." She said, "You were physically there."
But you were not present. Do you know how many times Michael tried to talk to you about his depression? How many times he tried to tell you he was struggling? And you said, "Just pray about it. Just think positive. Just be grateful for what you have." You never heard him. You never saw him. You saw a son who needed money, and a wife who needed babysitting, and grandchildren who needed presents. You never saw us as people. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. But somewhere deep inside me, a small, quiet voice said she was not completely wrong. I thought about all the times Michael tried to talk to me about something hard, and I changed the subject. All the times I gave him money instead of time. All the times I thought being a good mother meant providing, not listening. But that did not excuse what she was saying. That did not make it okay to throw me away like a piece of trash. I said, "The anniversary party? Who was invited?" She said, "Family, friends, people who matter to us." I said, "I am his mother." She said, "Biology is not the same as family." Those words hit me harder than anything else. Biology is not the same as family. I had spent 68 years believing the opposite, believing that blood was everything, that the people you raised and loved and sacrificed for would always be yours, that motherhood was a permanent, unbreakable bond. And Kelly was standing in her living room with her candle burning and her gray sectional and her rearranged photos, telling me that none of it meant anything. I stood up. My legs felt like they might give out, but I stood up anyway. I said, "Where is Michael?" She said, "He is at work." I said, "Do not lie to me." She said, "He is at Sarah's house. They are planning the party together. Sarah is hosting. Michael is helping. They did not want you to know because they knew you would make it about yourself. They knew you would cry and guilt trip and try to ruin everything. That is what you do. That is who you are. A victim, a martyr, a woman who has spent her entire life making everyone feel guilty for not loving her enough." I walked to the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the knob. Kelly did not follow me. She did not say goodbye. She did not say sorry. She just stood there in her living room with her arms crossed, watching me leave, like she had been waiting for this moment for years. I walked down the cracked walkway to my car. I got in and closed the door and sat there in the driver's seat. The sun was starting to go down. The sky was orange and pink and purple. It was beautiful. I wanted to appreciate it. I wanted to feel something other than this hollow, crushing emptiness. But all I could see was Kelly's face. All I could hear was her voice. "You are just an ATM. You are just an ATM. You are just an ATM." I drove home. I do not remember the drive. I do not remember turning onto the back roads or passing the farm or the church or the elementary school. I do not remember anything until I pulled into my own driveway and saw Robert standing on the porch. He had come outside to get the mail. He was holding a stack of envelopes in his hands. He looked confused. He always looked confused now. The dementia was stealing him piece by piece. Some days he knew me. Some days he did not. Today he looked at me like I was a stranger pulling into his driveway, a stranger getting out of a car, a stranger walking toward him with tears on her face.
He said, "Can I help you?" I said, "It is me, Robert. It is your wife." He looked at the envelopes in his hands. Then he looked at me. Then he said, "I do not have a wife." I went inside. I walked past the living room where the television was still on, past the kitchen where my coffee had gone cold again, past the laundry room where the towels were still stacked in their perfect piles, white on top, blue underneath. I went into the bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and I looked at the wedding photo on my nightstand. Robert and me on our wedding day, 1978. We were so young, so happy, so sure that love would be enough. I looked at that photo and I thought about how many people I had loved in my life. My mother, who died of cancer when I was 40. My father, who followed her 2 years later because he could not live without her.
My husband, who was forgetting my name. My daughter, who called me too sensitive. My son, who let his wife call me an ATM. My grandchildren, who probably would not even remember me in 10 years. I did not cry. That was the strange thing. I sat there on the edge of the bed and I wanted to cry. I needed to cry, but the tears would not come. Something inside me had dried up. Something had broken in a way that could not be fixed with tears. I just sat there staring at the wedding photo until the light outside the window faded completely and the room went dark. The next morning I woke up and for one single beautiful second I forgot what had happened. I woke up and I looked at the sunlight coming through the curtains and I thought it was going to be a normal day. Then the memory hit me like a truck. You are just an ATM. I closed my eyes and tried to go back to that moment of forgetting. I could not. The words were carved into me now. They would be there forever. I got out of bed. Robert was still asleep. He was on his side with his mouth open and his hands curled under his pillow. He looked peaceful. He looked like the man I married. I stood there watching him breathe, and I thought about whether he would even remember me when he woke up. Some days he did. Some days he did not. The doctor said it would get worse. They said eventually he would not recognize anyone at all. I used to be terrified of that day. Now I was not sure it mattered. If my own children could throw me away like garbage, what difference did it make if my husband forgot my name? I went to the kitchen and made coffee. I poured a cup and added 1 spoon of sugar and a splash of milk. I sat at the kitchen table. The crack in the drywall was still there. The bird feeder was still empty. The garden was still full of weeds. I looked at my phone. There were 17 messages in the family group chat. I opened the chat, then scrolled through them. Kelly had posted photos of centerpieces. Sarah had posted photos of decorations. Maddie had posted a photo of the cake. It was a beautiful cake. 3 tiers, white frosting, fresh flowers. The words Michael and Kelly, 10 years, in gold lettering. There were dozens of messages from people I did not know. Friends, co-workers, neighbors. All of them excited about the party. All of them planning to attend. All of them unaware that the mother of the groom was sitting alone in her kitchen, drinking cold coffee and reading about a party she was not allowed to attend. I put the phone down. I picked it up again. I typed a message into the group chat. I typed, "Congratulations to Michael and Kelly on 10 years. I hope it is a beautiful celebration." Then I deleted it. I typed it again. I deleted it again. I typed it a 3rd time and I hit send before I could change my mind. The message sat there in the chat for a few seconds. Then Sarah replied with a thumbs up emoji. Then Kelly replied with a heart emoji. Then Maddie replied with a gif of someone blowing out candles. That was it. No follow-up, no explanation, no apology, just a thumbs up and a heart and a gif. Like I had wished them a happy anniversary from a great distance. Like I was a distant aunt they barely remembered. Like I was no one. Friday came. I knew it was Friday because I had been counting the days. I had been waking up every morning and thinking, 3 more days, 2 more days, 1 more day. Friday morning, I woke up and I thought, today is the day. Today, my son and his wife will celebrate 10 years of marriage with everyone they love, except me. I got out of bed and made coffee. Robert was in the living room watching the news. He did not say good morning. He did not look at me. I stood in the doorway for a minute watching him watch the television. Then I went back to the kitchen. I decided to clean the house. I do not know why. Maybe I needed something to do with my hands. Maybe I thought if I could make the house clean and orderly, then I could make my mind clean and orderly. I scrubbed the kitchen counters. I mopped the floor. I dusted the living room. I vacuumed the carpets. I cleaned the bathroom until it smelled like bleach and lemon. Robert watched me the whole time with that blank expression. He did not ask why I was cleaning. He did not offer to help. He just sat there in his recliner with his hands in his lap, watching me scrub and mop and dust like I was a character on the television. At 4 p.m., I checked the mail. There was nothing. No invitation, no apology, no explanation. Just a bill and a catalog and a flyer for a pizza place that had opened on the other side of town. I threw the flyer in the trash. I put the bill on the counter. I set the catalog on the coffee table, even though I knew I would never read it. Then I went back to the kitchen and sat down and waited. The party started at 7. I knew this because Sarah had posted the details in the group chat 2 days ago. 7 p.m. at the country club. Cocktails at 7, dinner at 8, dancing at 9. I sat in my kitchen and watched the clock. 6 p.m., 6:30, 7 p.m. Right at 7, the group chat exploded with photos. Kelly in a beautiful blue dress, Michael in a gray suit. The country club all lit up with string lights and candles. The centerpieces up close. The tables with their white tablecloths and gold napkins. Sarah hugging Kelly. Maddie and her cousins posing together. A group shot of 20 or 30 people standing in front of a banner that said Michael and Kelly 10 years. I looked at that photo for a long time. I zoomed in on every face. I did not recognize half of them. Friends from work, neighbors from the subdivision, people I had never met, people who had taken my place, people who had been invited to celebrate a marriage I had helped build, a house I had helped buy, children I had helped raise. I scrolled through the photos for an hour, maybe 2 hours. I lost track of time. Every new photo was another knife in my chest. Here they are eating dinner. Here they are cutting the cake. Here they are dancing. Here is Michael giving a speech. I wished I could hear the speech. I wondered if he mentioned me. I wondered if he said anything about his mother, who raised him and loved him and gave him everything. I doubted it. I doubted he thought about me at all. At 9:30, the phone rang. It was Diane. I answered and she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I am fine." She said, "You are not fine. I can hear it in your voice." I said, "I am sitting in my kitchen looking at photos of my son's anniversary party that I was not invited to. So no, I am not fine." Diane said, "I am so sorry." I said, "Do not be sorry. You did not do this." Diane said, "Have you talked to Michael?" I said, "He has not returned my calls." Diane said, "What about Sarah?" I said, "She sent me a thumbs up emoji." Diane said, "That is it." I said, "That is it." Diane was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know what I think?" I said, "What?" She said, "I think you should stop waiting for them to love you the way you want to be loved. I think you should accept that they are not going to change. And I think you should start living your life for yourself. You are 68 years old. You have been taking care of everyone else for almost 50 years. Maybe it is time to take care of yourself." I knew she was right. I knew she was telling me the truth. But knowing something is true and being able to live with it are two different things. I said, "I will think about it." Diane said, "Do not just think about it. Do something about it." Then she said goodnight and hung up. I sat in the kitchen for a long time after that. The photos kept coming. The group chat kept buzzing. I stopped looking. I put the phone face down on the table and I stared at the crack in the drywall. I thought about all the years I had spent being a mother, all the sleepless nights, all the missed opportunities, all the dreams I had put on hold because my children needed me. I thought about the job I turned down because it would have meant traveling, the vacations I did not take because the kids were too young, the hobbies I never pursued because there was no time. I gave all of it to them, every last piece of myself. And now they were at a party without me, and Kelly was wearing a blue dress and Michael was giving a speech. And somewhere in that country club full of laughing people, my daughter-in-law was probably telling someone that I was just an ATM. I finally cried that night. It was almost midnight and I was still sitting at the kitchen table, and the tears came without warning. Not gentle tears, not soft, quiet tears. These were the kind of tears that come from somewhere deep and primal, the kind that make your whole body shake, the kind that sound like an animal caught in a trap. I cried until my throat was raw, and my eyes were swollen, and my nose was running, and I could not breathe.
I cried for the little boy who climbed into my bed after nightmares. I cried for the teenager who hugged me so hard he lifted me off the ground. I cried for the young man who asked me to walk him down the aisle. And then I cried for myself, for the woman who gave everything and got nothing in return, for the mother who became an ATM, for the grandmother who became invisible, for the wife whose husband no longer knew her name. Robert came into the kitchen. He must have heard me crying. He stood in the doorway in his pajamas, looking confused. He said, "What is wrong?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "I am just tired." He nodded, like that made sense. Then he went back to the bedroom. He did not hug me. He did not comfort me. He did not sit with me. He just turned around and walked away. I cannot blame him. The dementia had taken most of him already. The man I married was mostly gone. What was left was a shell, a kind shell, a gentle shell, but still a shell. The party ended. I know this because the photos stopped coming. The group chat went quiet. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. I sat there until 2 a.m. Then I went to bed. Robert was already asleep. He had taken his side of the bed and left me a sliver on the other side. I lay down and stared at the ceiling. I did not sleep.
I just lay there in the dark, listening to Robert breathe and thinking about what Diane had said. Maybe it was time to start living for myself. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for them to love me. Maybe it was time to accept that the family I thought I had never really existed. The next morning, I woke up and the sun was shining and the birds were singing and the world was carrying on like nothing had happened. I got out of bed and made coffee. I added 1 spoon of sugar and a splash of milk. I sat at the kitchen table. I looked at the crack in the drywall. I looked at the empty bird feeder. I looked at the garden full of weeds. And I made a decision. It was not a dramatic decision. It was not a revenge decision. It was just a quiet, small decision to stop trying so hard, to stop calling when they would not answer, to stop checking the group chat for photos of a life I was not part of, to stop being the ATM. I did not cut them off completely. I am a mother. I cannot do that. But I stopped reaching out first. I stopped sending money. I stopped offering to babysit. I stopped showing up with casseroles. I stopped waiting by the phone. I just stopped. And you know what happened? Nothing. They did not notice. They did not call and ask why I had gone quiet. They did not show up at my door wondering if I was okay. They just went on with their lives like I had never been there at all, like I had been a ghost all along, and they had just finally stopped pretending to see me.
That was 6 months ago. I am 69 years old now. My birthday came and went. Sarah sent a text. Michael sent a text. Kelly sent a text. They all said happy birthday, and they all used the same emoji, a cake, a balloon, a smiley face. I typed thank you, and I did not say anything else. Robert forgot my birthday. He forgot his own birthday too, so I cannot be angry about that. The dementia is worse now. Some days he calls me by his mother's name. Some days he asks me who I am and why I am in his house. I tell him I am his wife. He says I do not have a wife. I tell him we have been married for 46 years. He says that is impossible because he is not old enough to have been married that long. I still fold the towels, white on top, blue underneath. I still make coffee every morning, 1 spoon of sugar, a splash of milk. I still sit at the kitchen table and look at the crack in the drywall and wonder if anyone will ever fix it. Probably not, but that is okay. Some cracks do not get fixed. Some cracks just stay there forever as a reminder of what broke. That is what I am now, a crack. A woman with a crack in her chest where her family used to be. It does not hurt as much anymore. The edges have gone dull, but it is still there. It will always be there. I do not know if Michael and Kelly are happy. I do not know if Sarah is happy. I do not know if my grandchildren remember my name. I do not ask. I do not check the group chat. I do not look at the photos.
I just live my small, quiet life in my small, quiet house with my husband who forgets me and my phone that never rings and my bird feeder that is always empty. Some people would say I am lonely. Maybe I am, but I have been lonely for a long time. I just did not want to admit it. Now I admit it. Now I sit with it. Now I let it be part of me. The other day I was at the grocery store and I saw Kelly. She was in the produce section picking out apples. She looked the same. Yoga pants, messy bun, that catalog smile. She did not see me. I stood at the end of the aisle and watched her for a minute. She was talking on her phone, laughing at something. She looked happy. I thought about walking up to her. I thought about saying hello. I thought about asking how Michael was doing and how the kids were doing and whether anyone had ever fixed the crack in the walkway. But I did not. I turned around and walked to the other end of the store and bought my milk and my bread and my eggs, and I went home. I put the groceries away and I made a cup of coffee, and I sat at the kitchen table and I looked at the crack in the drywall. And I thought about what Kelly said to me that day in her living room. You are just an ATM. I used to think those words were cruel. Now I think they were honest. That is what I was to them. A machine that dispensed money and babysitting and casseroles. A machine that they could use until it broke and then throw away. I broke. They threw me away. That is the story.
That is all the story. But here is what I know now that I did not know then. An ATM does not have a heart. An ATM does not feel pain. An ATM does not lie awake at night wondering where it went wrong. I am not an ATM. I am a woman, a mother, a grandmother, a wife. I am a woman who loved too much and trusted too deeply and gave too freely. And if that makes me foolish, then I am foolish. But I would rather be foolish and broken than cold and empty like them. Because at least I feel something. At least I know what love is. At least I can sit here in my quiet kitchen with my cold coffee and my cracked wall and my empty bird feeder and know that I did my best. I gave everything I had. And if that was not enough for them, then that is their loss, not mine. The phone is sitting on the table right now. It is dark. No messages, no calls, no notifications. Just a black screen reflecting my tired face. I am 69 years old, and I am alone. And I am learning that alone is not the same as lonely. Alone is just a fact. Lonely is a feeling, and I am done letting them make me feel things. I